We are getting ready to cut our moldings in here. Sometimes, years ago, the way I learned, my teacher actually would put a straight edge up across this side, and then he would run a checkering tool down the side of that straight edge. And because, that to hold it steady, it really takes two people. And I got to the point years ago, I've always worked pretty much in the shop by myself, didn't have extra hands. I came up with a little tool. It's really simple. I would have made it prettier nowadays, but hey, it works. It's just a simple L. It's got a piece of brass down here so it doesn't have the friction on it. It runs across here. It's got pins, simple holes. I pull this out, put it in the place I want it for the height, and then it simply rides across the stock like that. And then you kind of run it in a slight angle. So what you're wanting is, so when this scribe is cutting, it's not dragging across, it's actually dragging in an angle, and it'll do a better cut without making a jagged cut. So we're going to end up scoring a line here. What I'm doing, if I'm using a molding that you're doing, I don't care if it's concave or you're doing a double line molding with a small lip edge on the top, I cut the farthest top one in there. So my goal is to cut from here to the very top with my score line, then undercut and come back here and relieve the molding, take all that out. When I go to cut this secondary molding, then I'll use a checkering tool with a safe side. One of these guys probably has a fancy name. Anyhow, I'm going in there and I'm just riding the edge and putting my second score in there to make that. And then if I'm doing a concave molding, then I'll come in and I'll relieve the cup area all the way through, all the way up to the side here. But this is the simple tool. You can make something fancier where the pin is stays permanent and have some kind of adjuster. But the main thing is keep this thing heavy. I've added more weight to it through the years just so it has more heaviness in your hand. It tends to work a little better, and when you pinch it, it rides truly just across that side. You want to ride off of the bottom if you want a nice even molding across here rather than riding off the top down. I built scratch blocks years ago where I'd scrape the molding in. I'd seen those before. It's like a big L, and you put the blade in there. It makes like an OG molding or whatever you want. And a lot of Forestocks in the 18th century were shaped with those things because you can tell. I've had simple, what someone may call a simple Schimmel or a plain little rifle with Grand Staff out of Shenandoah County, that the gun had no guard, a simple iron guard, no butt plate, no any embellishments, but the Forestock had a really pretty concave molding. And the reason I think that is because he's shaping his whole entire Forestock with a scrape block. So they're going through. I've tried it before. I like it well enough, but it makes a chatterness, especially if you have a really good piece of curl. It tends to want to chatter and have a heavy ripple effect. That's not my goal. I kind of like a smoother finish. So I come through with my scrapers and scrape to get where I want as much as I can. And then I come back with a little finished sandpaper and smooth off the top. I've done guns in the past where there's been no sandpaper, just scraping and burnishing. And when you get into a piece of wood that has a lot of curl, it tends to want to chatter a lot. If you like that effect, go for it. Most of the time, I just like a soft, smoother type of a rifle. I like smooth edges on the barrel. I like smooth edges on the wood. Here again, we've gone past it. We have actually taken all the stain cover off of it, or the pinking, I call it pinking or whatever, putting a couple drops in your water to raise the grain up. I raise the grain up at least a couple times before I get ready to start cutting moldings, because that way you're not dealing with this molding when you start raising the grain second, third, fourth time down the road. You're not dealing with this raising the grain. You're only dealing with the issue on your new cut edge, which is going to be your relief molding down, and you don't have to screw around with this top anymore. You're just mainly just cleaning up that relieved area that we're working on next. So we're going to cut some lines, and then we'll come back and show you the next process. At this point, we have run our scribe down through here. Going back to it for those who may not have saw the earlier video. This little scribe is basically setting the height off of that. We're blocking it here. We're kind of scribing it at a slight angle because you don't want the pin to drag straight through. It kind of chatters a lot. I tend to like to kind of roll it a little sideways like this, and then you can come back the other way. You'll feel the grain structure to feel how it's laying out. You see here it's got a rough bird edge. I take a little bit of sandpaper over the whole thing and just cut the burr edge off of the line so it doesn't have any chatter to it. You can take a brush, clean out the little line, and at that point in time I take a carving knife that's got a pretty long curved angle on it, and I cut that line, and I use it as my guide, and I just do it an inch or two at a time, holding very solid with a lot of down pressure to cut that line. So the kicker is because this gouge line's cutting in pretty much straight down, I do not want to scribe this too far down because it's making an undercut. I'm looking to just get in there, and then I'll use the knife to set the side and get in there and cut that whole thing down. Then I'll come back with another knife. You can use a chisel if you want to, but if you're cutting straight forward with it, you're going to have chips for every piece of curl. I like to come in with a carving knife, and I go, this one I built years ago, just a little, kind of like a little mason's trowel kind of a thing, angle, sharpen it up, make sure it's super sharp before you start this process. And I'm coming in here and actually kind of cutting in rows like this coming forward. And what it does is you're cutting that curl across the grain. You're not trying to cut it with the grain so it's weeping. The sway is going up and down. If you cut this way, it's going to break and chip and break and chip. Or if you're cutting down, you have a much, much better chance of survival of keeping those inner corners. Nothing more frustrating to get a big chip that goes down deep into there. It's hard to get that out of your molding line. Some people may not care. I do. And then I'll come back with a scraper, little scraper like this, and I'll just start scraping all the way through. This gives me a depth gauge. I can tell from the surface of this wood to how deep I am when I'm scraping through the whole thing. You can get in there. You got a bent file, you can always make one. I think I've got one here in the drawer. And somewhere here in the drawer. Don't use it very often, but it's only for moldings, pretty much. There it is. You can use a little bent file like this. You can make one, just take a file, bend it down. The kicker is put a safe side on it, take the sides off, so when you go through and you clean up the surface, you're not doing anything other than just cutting that, and you're not cutting the side of your molding. Also, you can smooth the face out of it so it's got a sharper edge. It gives you the ability to cut through. But that's how I'm relieving moldings out. Once you get where you want, you get the depth you want, everything's nice and smooth, the background's good, you can sand this edge or you can scrape down, either way, and then come back with your double line if you're going to do an extra molding. And then you're putting the safe side of your cutter, which is the top one, you're putting it on the top side, so you're actually cutting about like that. But you don't want to do that now with the line. Now if you're doing an incised line and you're doing incised moldings, you're not relieving it, you can go through here with a real sharp triangular file and start cutting through to relieve that, and then let your secondary checkering tool come in and cut your second line in there and do a nice job. But on this guy, he is getting relief carved. Same thing with the back. We've gotten to the point where we relieve this molding. A lot of times you're coming in here and you're taking ones, don't try to take it all at one time. Take a line close to your cut line. So go ahead and score that down and chip through. And then I take my carving tool and come in and take another, and always keep the blade moving in an angle to your curl. It'll help keep it from chipping out. And then once I get to that point, I'll use a scraper like that, and we'll get down here and we just start cutting it down. And what it does, your scraper will give you a safe side against your molding line. Plus it gives you a depth gauge. So if you want the thickness of what the scraper is, just keep running it and make sure everything's nice and sharp. Sharpen that scraper up so it's really nice. You can make your rollover edge with it, just like what we're doing here. We're coming up and taking that transition off of it, where we're almost diamond the forestock out in that section. We're rolling over and picking it up. And don't try to take too much. You're just little tiny cuts, so you're not actually getting in there and digging a trough between each curl and ending up with a washboard when it's all said and done. And you just transition it over. And that's pretty much it. And you just repeat it all the way down the line. On the other side, you may have to flip and come the other direction. So if you just think that you want to scrape this way, and if you're catching a lot of resistance, then go ahead and flip this around. A lot of times the way your curl and the way your grain structure is on your forestock, you don't want to tell it what to do. It's going to tell you what you need to do to get the outcome. And your outcome is to get as smooth of a background. I look at guns when people hand them to me. I look at their moldings. It's one of the first couple things I look at when it comes to carving, because it's easy to keep them symmetrical. I mean, it's somewhat easy. It takes practice, but the right tools and patience, you can have a nice solid molding. And I don't tend to like moldings that are, I like them a little bit bolder. I don't like them super shallow. Insides moldings are just a shortcut. But if that's what you can do successfully, then knock it out and tear it up. But relief moldings puts it on another plane, at least in the gun world. And here again, hopefully this helps you be able to do a little bit better molding. Because I've had people ask me how I get them straight, and this is how I'm doing it. So I'll bring you back when we get ready to finish this out and clean this background out. And then when we get ready to set that. And pretty much we're going to repeat and do the same exact thing on the opposite side. All right, just to finish up on our molding videos here, we went ahead and relieved all the sides, came through and cleaned all that up. You can run your finger through there. It doesn't have hardly any chatter whatsoever. You don't even feel much of a ripple. Just come through, and then we come through with a piece of sandpaper. I use a little block like this and wrap sandpaper around. I got holes in it so I can pinch it easier. And I just come through and just clean it up like that. Get your molding done. Terminate it out with a little step here. A lot of times I like the step here, sometimes back here at the pipe. Depends on how far this is. And because this is an elongated gun, over a 2-inch nose cap, I like my nose caps a little bit longer than my pipes, just by a little bit. I tend to not like a shorter nose cap than a pipe. I think proportion-wise, balance, it kind of looks funky. And we're coming in with our secondary molding. So you're coming in here and you're cutting this one with a checking tool. You can use different widths of these guys. It doesn't matter. You can make your own for that matter. And so you're just coming through. It kind of makes like a little V situation. And then I use a very, very sharp triangular file, which is here on the bench someplace. That one right there. And come through and detail this. And I'll probably end up detailing this at least once or twice more. Every time I put water on it and the grain raises, I'm going to have to come in here and clean this out, and then I will go through and redefine this line, because I like it to be really crisp in there if you can. Also, when you're putting your stains and stuff, sometimes you'll get, I tend to like highlights on my gun, so I do a little darker stain over and then buff it down so it keeps darker lines in your moldings and stuff. I think it looks a whole lot better. So anyway, gang, that's our finished molding. Now we're going to turn, flip, and repeat.